Mr. Pro Tem, distinguished colleagues, this is just a briefing on the Act to amend Chapter 14, offences involving danger to the person, which is part of Title 26, the Penal Code, and to add here to a subchapter E under the title Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. For purposes of this briefing, we did a letter which we distributed early this morning.
Early this morning?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have a copy of it?
No, not yet. Thank you, sir.
This law, my colleagues, was considered at a retreat that we had,
Thank you, sir.
but you might not be aware that after that retreat, I personally was not well for a week. And so, given the urgency of other matters before us, especially the integrity institutions, we put our time more to those than to this. That's why we're only giving you a briefing on this. We all agreed at the retreat that there is a need for a comprehensive drug law to be enacted by the legislature to address the abuse of drugs and other psychotropic substances in Liberia, which affecting all categories of persons, especially what we call the disadvantaged youth, who parade the streets of cities and communities, commit all kinds of crimes while under the influence. We're all concerned at the retreat about the availability of and easy access to drugs and other psychotropic substances in Liberia. We want you to recall that in 2021, Senator Chris Moyo of Bond County, our distinguished colleague, did submit to the Senate a draft amendment to the drug law, as according to him was proposed by the youth of Bond County. And this document was referred to the Judiciary Committee. In our report of 14 June 2021 to plenary on Senator Moyo's version of the drug law, we raised certain issues. One, that what was considered to be the drug law was actually part of the public health law, a revised version of which had been submitted to the legislature in 2020. Excuse me, we wrote 2002, it should be 2020. And it is still under consideration by the legislature. That the sanctions that were put into this law should actually be part of the criminal law of Liberia, and that the Drug Enforcement Agency was in the process of reviewing the drug law for submission to the President for onward referral to the legislature for enactment into law. Now, Senator Moyo's submission to us was intended to repeal Section 41.2, 41.3, 41.24, 41.25, 41.26, 41.27, and 41.28 of the Public Health Law, and to amend Section 75.1 of the Penal Law. Senator Moyo's submission, if it had been enacted into law, would have amended Chapter 14 of the Penal Law entitled Offences Involving Danger to the Person, and add a new Chapter E entitled Controlled Drugs and Substances. A major issue of concern with Senator Moyo's submission is that the punishment for the various offenses described therein appear to be very harsh. Each of them were deemed to be a felony, punishable by imprisonment, and more important, each crime was deemed intended to be, quote, quote, non-bailable, which would have been in violation of Article 21(d)(I) of our Constitution, which says anybody who is accused entitled to bail. For these reasons, the Judiciary Committee then proposed and recommended, and the Senate accepted, that we should place Senator Moi's submission in abeyance until such time that the Drug Enforcement Agency has completed its review of the so-called drug law and the President submitted a proposed bill for enactment. It will appear that what we have before us is that proposed bill for the President's office. Now, at the retreat, we took note of various provisions of the current public health law, which is Title 33 of the Liberian Code of Law revised, which has a part 5 entitled Regulation of Drugs, with a chapter 41 entitled Control of Narcotic Drugs, a subchapter B entitled Conduct in Relation to Narcotic Drugs Regulated, a subchapter C entitled Treatment of Narcotic Addicts, a subchapter D entitled Administration, which establishes a narcotics control unit within the Ministry of Health and in hospitals, and a subchapter E and a chapter 42 entitled Control of Hallucinogenic Drugs, and a chapter 43 entitled Control of Drugs other than narcotic and hallucinogenic drugs. Then we took a look at the public health law revised, which is still under consideration by the legislature. And these identical headings from the existing public health law are in the revised instrument pending before us. Now, we discovered that while the existing law and the revised law, public health law, all law narcotic drugs and hallucinogenic drugs and certain other psychotropic drugs other than narcotic and hallucinogenic drugs, the only enforcement measure in those laws is that the drugs should be seized when discovered by public health authorities. There is no criminal sanction or penalty for the cultivation, possession, use, sale, export, or import of narcotic and hallucinogenic drugs and other psychotropic drugs. And as a matter of basic principles of drafting laws, we deem that criminal sections for such conduct should not be placed in the public health law, but instead should be placed in the penal law. So we went to the penal law as it is existing now, and discovered that there is a section 17.5, which provides, quote, a person is guilty of an infraction, the most minimum criminal offense, if he appears in any public place manifestly under the influence of alcohol, narcotics, or other drugs, not therapeutically administered, to the degree that he may endanger himself or other person or property or other persons in his vicinity. So we gather at the retreat that perhaps because sanctions for use and possession of narcotic drugs, hallucinogenic drugs, and psychotropic substances is so minimal, it's an infraction. Maybe that's why the use is so pervasive, the availability is so easy. And we determined that this is one of the reasons why we should have a law entitled Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. Because this Controlled Drugs and Substances Act provides criminal sanctions for the cultivation, use, possession, sale, import, and export of controlled drugs and substances. This law also names with particularity and specificity what are controlled drugs and substances. It domesticates certain international treaties and protocols, especially the listing of narcotic drugs, hallucinogenic drugs, and psychotropic drugs, which ought to and should be controlled, and it provides 4 separate schedules of such drugs, controlled drugs, and substances. Then the law before us explicitly incorporates and makes it a part of the penal law of Liberia. If you go to the law itself, will you please go there? On the third sheet, unfortunately, we didn't page it. On the third sheet, there is an item in bold letters called unlicensed importation of controlled drugs or substances. Then you go to the following page, you see unlicensed exportation of controlled drugs or substances. Then below to the bottom, you see unlicensed sale, trading and administration, dispensation, delivery, distribution, dispatch in transit, and transportation of controlled drugs or substances. You go to the next page, that's section 14.86, unlicensed manufacture of controlled drugs or substances. Then you go to the following page, section 14.87, unlawful diversion of controlled precursors and essential chemicals. Section 14.48, unlicensed manufacture, transport, or distribution of equipment, instrument, apparatus, and other paraphernalia for controlled drug or substance. Then section 14.89, unlicensed possession of controlled drugs or substances. Section 14.90, unlicensed cultivation or culture or production of plants. And then the following page, section 14.91, use of controlled drugs or substances. And then 14.92, we have prescription abuse. Then the following page, 14.93, we got illicit trafficking. 14.94, unlawful maintenance of place for drugs or substances. Go to the following page, 14.95, concealing property derived from drug offense. 14.96, receiving property derived from drug offense. 14.97, confiscation and forfeiture. We thought to highlight that if you are involved with possession, use, sale, importation, and distribution of controlled drugs and substances, then you'll be liable for confiscation in the event of conviction, confiscation, and forfeiture of that property. And of course, you got aggravated circumstances. If you go to the following pages, that one to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pages of the list of drugs and controlled substances which are prohibited. We took this list originally from the 1961 Convention of the United Nations, which was later amended to the 1971 Convention, and is attending protocols to ensure that if you were said to have violated the law, they will be able to identify the identical drug or controlled substance that you use, possess, sold, distributed, or trafficked in Liberia. Now, after all of what we did, we came to the conclusion that this law is good for Liberia, as it criminalizes the cultivation, use, sale. Let me go back one. We put penalty other than what? Harsh imprisonment. For trafficking, the punishment is very tough. For selling and distributing, the punishment is very tough. But one of the things we put there, not only things we did, we dispense with what Senator Moy had suggested, that is a non-billable offense. We said most of it is for imprisonment, but then when it comes to the punishment, in addition to imprisonment, if you must go on bail, then you have to put as bail bond cash to the value of not less than 200% of the value of the drugs that you are dealing in. We thought that would discourage people from dealing with drugs instead of saying it's non-billable. So it's billable, but when they take all your equipment, all your drugs and whatnot, and say it comes to $1 million, they gotta put $2 million bond in cash. Other than that, then you go to jail. All right. So it's billable, but it's a top bill. It's possible that we will go to some people and say our bill is too high. All right, it's too excessive. But this is basically what we discussed, and we came to the conclusion that the law is good for Liberia, as it criminalizes the cultivation, use, sale, import, and export of specific narcotic and hallucinogenic drugs and substances. And we think that this law will prevent and deter the commission of those acts by any person in Liberia. And we think the sanctions here are reasonable. We also believe and suggest to you that this law will bring relief from what we consider to be the menace of narcotic and hallucinogenic drugs and substances on the Liberian society, as evidenced by the thousands and thousands of disadvantaged youths who are addicted to them and who walk the streets of our cities and other communities and commit various other criminal offenses. Now, what has not been considered by the legislature so far, we took notice of, is the rehabilitation of disadvantaged youths who are addicted to controlled drugs and substances. We recommend that serious consideration ought to and should be given to this issue. Otherwise, the population of drug addicts and substance abusers in our country will greatly increase to the ultimate detriment of Liberia and the stability of the social fabric of our common patrimony. In view of the foregoing, we recommend 1. That the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act as redrafted by the Law Commission and the Judiciary Committee, which we provide draft we have here, be enacted into law. That the Senate, as reasonably practical and feasible, consider a program of action for the rehabilitation of disadvantaged youth, many of which are drug addicts and substance abusers, with the view of rehabilitating them and reintegrating them into the mainstream of society. We thought, on the advice of the protest, that this should just be a briefing that you will take home on your constituency break, talk about it, then we'll come back and we'll actually pass on it. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Okay, I will introduce you inputs from the group. As we carry the line home. No recess.
And colleagues, I want to thank the committee for an extraordinary job. Indeed, we will take it. But yesterday I was in church at the St. Nami United Methodist Church, and we had a pastor who came to our church with a number of young men and women. One of the women, a young woman, was 20. She came to give testimony in the church. Now, for 25 years, she had been taken by drugs. She spoke eloquently well. She said she stopped in the 11th grade. It means that she went to a very good high school, came from a very good family. And when she told her story, people wept in the church. There were a number of young people who were men. and who said just after they stopped, because somebody paid attention to them, their body changed, the respect for them has intensified. Problem, I think, and then a judge sat by me and said, but have you done this law? He said, complete. And I wasn't sure how far we had gone. But I'm now equipped to be able to talk about what we have done. And I think we all will be very proud of this. I'd like to note specifically that in the law or in the recommendations, there is something referred to as possession. And sometimes in our hurry, things like possession, maybe there will be words that we'll have to check. Whether just having somebody put drugs in your pocket or wherever and that is sufficient reason for you to, so possession, I thought would be a little strong thing. Then in the recommendations, the committee in 4 and 2, it says that the Senate, as early as reasonably practical and feasible, consider a program. I'm not quite sure that is the duty of the Senate. I think we probably should be saying practical and feasible, provide for action for the rehabilitation of disadvantaged youth, and again, not many of which are, to rather say, some of whom may be drug addicts. I mean, because some of our youth may behave in a certain way, but they may not be drug addicts. So would refer to them as some of whom may be, to give us an opportunity for an investigation. So, all in all, I think this is an extraordinary job by the committee. I want to thank you so much for what you've done. Thank you.
Yes, distinguished colleagues, I want to thank the committee, but notwithstanding this law being available for the past time, and we are still talking about available, it will still encourage the people to bring drugs into the country. And our children are there all around, damaging things, doing things that they're not supposed to do. So I think what will strengthen this is not available. Because the name available, they got some people that are doing the business, they are more than millionaires. So if they talk about findings, they will be willing to find and they will know what to do the way out. We amending, but it is not satisfactory to mothers. This bill should be not available. Notwithstanding, for we the mothers, we are still looking at the Senate to see what they can do more. The drugs law should be very serious. It is I don't know what to say, sir. All right.
Good then, distinguished colleagues, I will be brief because the chairman of the committee had just said that we are allowed to take the bill home on our break, and then we'll come back and make some decisions. And so, let me begin by thanking them and that of the Law Reform Commission for redrafting this bill. I think it is good. And for me, in principle, I support this bill. I'm going to vote for it. I wish we had earlier done this. We go to our communities. Our children are being harmed by drugs. Drugs have permeated all of our societies. Even if you're driving on the highway, sometimes when I'm going on a highway, I see plastic, certain signs. I'll ask my driver, what is this sign? Then they will say, this other sign, the other plastic represent the selling meat here. Sometimes if they put a sign or something up fingers, then they say it means they're selling drugs here. And yes, that's how serious it is. That's how serious they are using it. And some of the communities where you see the sign of drugs, you not believe that people there can afford drugs because they're going to sell it. So, colleagues, I want to urge all of us. Like I said, I wish we had done this earlier. We passed it before going. Nevertheless, we listened to the chairman. He was pressed for so many reports that we already passed on. So I'm going to take this one home. I'm going to read it thoroughly, and I think all of you will do the same, so that when we come back, we can do due justice to it in October. But I think my recommendation is that we should not pass this year without passing on this bill. This is a good bill. We should pass it in the interest of our young people. We need to turn the spread of drugs in our communities around by the passage of this bill. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Judiciary Committee for this great job. I want to also thank members of the Law Reform Commission for this work. Thank you, President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Pro Tem and colleagues. I want to thank my colleague, Honorable Moy, for highlighting and expressing our feelings about the drug situation. When the Minister of Finance was here, I questioned him about the $1 million, whether it was sufficient. What was it supposed to do for the drug program? I want to thank Senator Councilor Sherman for a job well done, and all of those who contributed in the workshop that culminated into what we have. My issue right now is the word that is used in the document, a program. Some program to address this. I think we already have some kind of program situated in the Minister of Youth and Sport. And I have a problem with that. That's why I questioned the Minister of Finance as to whether the Youth and Sport Ministry is able to address this endemic. In my opinion, I think the appropriate branch of government, be it the legislature or the executive, should set up a task force to address with this issue, because it's spiraling out of control. I think if a task force is identified with a special mandate to implement this law and the remedy thereto, I think it will address the issue speedily. I want to thank our colleague, the Honorable Senator from Monserrato, Tarasville, for highlighting this issue at one point to provide area to address this problem. But I think we should commit ourselves to allocating more money to this, or else we will not have a nation. We will not have individuals to replace us in the next 20, 30 years. And we should have passed away. I think we should develop or create a task force with a specific mandate, at least to reduce the incidence of this drugs problem. Honorable Senator, we will go home and discuss this with our constituents and seek more pieces of advice, but I think a task force will be in place.
Yes, Senator, so as the previous from Senator Sherman indicated, it's a serious matter, so we'll carry the report home, look at it, and in October, we'll finalize the law and have a big debate and take the appropriate actions on it. Having said that, we'll come to the end of our session. I will recognize our chaplain to make an announcement. After that, I will recognize Senator Baliba, whoever wanted the floor, and we will short statement and we'll